When Alien premiered in 1979, the studio refused to give the cast a premiere. It grossed more than $100 million anyway. 3 of those 8 actors are still alive in 2026. 5 are buried in 4 countries. The youngest never reached 40. First on the Nostromo's crew manifest, and the last person to ever step out of its airlock alive was Sigourney Weaver. She was 29 in the autumn of 1978, an off-Broadway actress with one fleeting appearance in Annie Hall to her name, when Ridley Scott built an entire test set just for her audition. The role of Warrant Officer Ellen Ripley had originally been written for a man. Nobody bothered to rewrite the lines once a woman was cast, which is why Ripley sounds nothing like any female character cinema had ever produced before her. She was the daughter of Pat Weaver, the man who had run NBC through the 1950s, and English actress Elizabeth Inglis. Her education was Stanford for English, Yale School of Drama for the MFA. There was no profit participation in her Alien contract and no obligation to appear in any sequel. That single missing clause is the reason she became one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood history. When 20th Century Fox crawled back 7 years later wanting Aliens, she could name her own price. James Cameron insisted she be in the film. She negotiated $1 million plus a share of the box office. Alien 3 paid $4 million, and Alien Resurrection paid $11. The $30,000 unknown had turned into a $16 million franchise. Sigourney met theater director Jim Simpson in 1983 at the Williamstown Theater Festival. They married on the 1st of October, 1984. Their marriage is still going 41 years later, which in Hollywood is closer to a miracle than a marriage. Their only child was born in April 1990 and now teaches digital storytelling at Columbia University. At 76, Sigourney Weaver is busier than she was at 50. The Venice Film Festival gave her its Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement in 2024. She returns this year in The Mandalorian and Grogu and the next Avatar sequel. Her home is in Manhattan with her husband of 4 decades. Ripley walked alone through the corridors of the Nostromo because she was the only one paying attention. Sigourney Weaver walked into Alien for $30,000 and walked out owning the rest of her career. The second name in the credits never made it to dinner. John Hurt played Executive Officer Gilbert Kane, the curious one who leaned in too close to an alien egg and got his face wrapped by something with fingers. His last full meal ended when something with teeth ripped open his sternum and ran out of frame. Ridley Scott filmed the chestburster scene in one continuous shot. He had packed butcher's organs into a prosthetic chest, set 4 cameras rolling because the budget would not pay for a second take, and kept the cast deliberately in the dark about what was about to happen. Hurt had been born John Vincent Hurt in Chesterfield, Derbyshire, on the 22nd of January 1940, the son of an Anglican vicar. He studied to be a painter at St. Martin's School of Art before changing course to acting at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. By the time he reported to Shepperton Studios in 1978, he had already received an Oscar nomination for Midnight Express. The Elephant Man paid him $2 million the year after Alien. His true ruin was nothing the studio did to him. From 1967 to 1983, he lived with a French Vogue model named Marie-Lise Volpillière-Pierrot. They never married, but they were together for 16 years, longer than any of his 4 wives lasted with him. In January 1983, she fell from a horse and died. Friends said John Hurt never fully came back from that morning. Through the mid-1980s, he drank heavily, lunged at paparazzi outside the BAFTA ceremony, and rebuilt his career around a grief he did not put down. 4 marriages followed across his life. 2 sons came from his 3rd marriage to Joan Dalton, Sasha and Nick, both of whom survive him. He was knighted in 2015. 1 month later, he announced he had pancreatic cancer. For a brief stretch that October, he said the cancer was in remission. The reprieve did not hold. John Hurt died on the 25th of January 2017 at home in Cromer, Norfolk, with his wife Anwen and his sons present. He had turned 77 3 days earlier. Cremation followed. His ashes were given to his family. There is no public marker, no headstone, no plot anyone can look up. The man whose chest delivered cinema's most replayed image keeps no fixed address now. Kane was the curious officer who leaned in too close and got a face full of something he could not understand. John Hurt was the actor who leaned in too close to a woman in 1967 and spent the next 40 years missing her. If this story has gotten to you, drop a comment naming the death in this cast that caught you off guard. The next one is the one nobody saw coming. Third in this cast was the man who went looking for the cat. Harry Dean Stanton played engine room technician Samuel Brett, the quiet one who answered every other line with the word right. His death in the dripping engine compartment, the first kill the creature made on screen, was a death without a fight. He went up into the rafters the way he did almost everything else, quietly. Stanton came up in West Irvine, Estill County, Kentucky. Born on the 14th of July, 1926, the son of a cook and a tobacco farmer. As a young man, he served as a Navy cook in the Pacific during the Second World War and was aboard ship at the Battle of Okinawa. After the war, he attended the University of Kentucky on the GI Bill, then left for Hollywood and shared an apartment with Jack Nicholson in the early 1960s. By the time Ridley Scott cast him as Brett, he had been in movies for 20 years without a single lead role to his name. That changed in 1984, when Wim Wenders cast him as Travis in Paris, Texas at age 58. The film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Industry pay never matched the praise. His net worth at death was approximately $10 million, modest for an actor with 200 screen credits. Marriage was never something he chose. The closest he came was actress Rebecca De Mornay, 35 years his junior. She left him during the production of Risky Business for her co-star Tom Cruise. In his 2013 documentary, Stanton said the line every interviewer eventually heard, "She left me for Tom Cruise." The end came on the 15th of September 2017 at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles of respiratory failure, age 91. Stanton was laid to rest in Bluegrass Memorial Gardens and Mausoleum in Nicholasville, Jessamine County, Kentucky. He had gone home to the state where he had been born 91 years earlier. Brett looked like a man who had given up halfway through his shift. Harry Dean Stanton was a Pacific War veteran who waited 58 years for a leading role, lost his great love to Tom Cruise, and went home to Kentucky in the end. The man at the top of the call sheet, fourth on this list, was Tom Skerritt. He played Captain Arthur Dallas, the merchant officer on the bridge calling shots, the man who climbed into a ventilation shaft with a flamethrower and got picked off at the 70-minute mark. Top-billed actors did not die in 1979 films. He was being paid roughly $200,000 to vanish on schedule, which was many times more than Sigourney Weaver's $30,000 for being the lead. Born in Detroit, Michigan, on the 25th of August 1933, Skerritt served in the United States Air Force from 1951 to 1955. He attended Wayne State University and UCLA, studied theater under mentors who included Robert Altman, and left school to act full-time. Altman cast him as Duke Forrest in MASH in 1970. 6 of Skerritt's films are now in the Library of Congress National Film Registry: MASH, Harold and Maude, Up in Smoke, Alien, Top Gun, and Smoke Signals. Skerritt has married 3 times. Charlotte Shanks gave him 3 children before the marriage ended in 1972. Sue Orrin ran a Seattle bed and breakfast and gave him a son named Colin before they divorced in 1992. In 1998, he married Julie Tokashiki, a former 20th Century Fox studio executive 30 years his junior. They adopted a daughter, Emmy, in 2007. The marriage to Julie is still going 28 years later. In March 2026, a video of Skerritt at a convention went viral on TikTok. The text overlay said he was 92. Comments flooded in calling him handsome, ageless, still standing. He won the Emmy for Picket Fences in 1993. The role of Viper brought him back in Top Gun: Maverick in 2022. He co-founded the Red Badge Project for veterans with PTSD and the Film School, a Seattle nonprofit. His life divides between Lake Washington and Lopez Island in the San Juans. Dallas was the captain who got killed first because the rules of the genre said someone had to. Tom Skerritt is the captain who is somehow still standing at 92, the only person in this cast who has outlived everyone he reported to, including the studio that paid him to die. Fifth in the cast was a man who claimed to be a prince. Yaphet Kotto, born Frederick Samuel Kotto in Harlem on the 15th of November, 1939, wrote in his autobiography that his father had been the rightful crown prince of the royal Bell family of Cameroon. His mother Gladys was an American nurse and army officer who converted to Judaism for the marriage. The parents separated when Yaphet was a child, and he grew up in the Bronx with his maternal grandparents, going to shul on Fridays in a neighborhood that was mostly Baptist, which he later said meant fistfights every weekend. He played Chief Engineer Dennis Parker, the working-class voice on the Nostromo. Standing 6 feet 4 inches, Kotto gave Parker a fury that read as legitimate. When the chest burster fired on set, he walked off in real anger because Ridley Scott had not told the cast what was about to happen. His most painful career grievance was turning down the role of Captain Jean-Luc Picard on Star Trek: The Next Generation, a decision he later said cost him millions of dollars. The role of Lieutenant Al Giardello on Homicide: Life on the Street held him through 6 seasons from 1993 to 1999 without ever earning a single Emmy nomination. Net worth at death was approximately $5 million. Modest, because he had 6 children from 3 marriages and had walked away from Hollywood for a quieter life elsewhere. In 1998, he married Tessie Sinahan, a Filipina secretary, and moved with her to a coastal town near Manila. They were together for 23 years until he died there on the 15th of March, 2021, age 81. His wife wrote on Facebook that he was, for her, a real hero. A good father, a good husband, a decent human being, very rare to find. After cremation in Manila, his ashes were flown back to the United States and interred at Home of Peace Cemetery in Lakewood, Pierce County, Washington, a Jewish cemetery, in keeping with the faith he had carried his whole life. Parker was the engine room foreman who would not stop arguing about money. Yaphet Kotto was the son of a Cameroonian crown prince and a black Jewish nurse from the Bronx who turned down the captain's chair on Star Trek and chose the Philippines over Los Angeles when the chance finally came. Subscribe if you are still with us. The next entry is the woman who passed out on set when the chest burster fired, because Ridley Scott had told nobody what was coming. Number 6 is the one who passed out for real. Veronica Cartwright was 29 years old, a child star turned adult horror veteran, when Ridley Scott cast her as navigator Joan Lambert. She had originally auditioned to play Ripley. Nobody at the production told her she had been recast as Lambert. She found out when she arrived in London for wardrobe fittings. Cartwright had been born in Bristol, England, on the 20th of April 1949, and moved to Los Angeles at age 9 with her younger sister Angela, who would grow up to play Brigida in The Sound of Music. The Kellogg's Cornflakes girl in the commercials was her. On Leave It to Beaver, she was the one who gave Beaver Cleaver his first kiss. By the time Alien started shooting, she had survived Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, William Wyler's The Children's Hour, and the 1978 invasion of the Body Snatchers. The chest burster scene cost her physically. Ridley Scott pumped real stage blood through hoses for the take. Veronica was hit with a 3-foot jet of it across the face. She passed out where she stood. Her terrified reaction in the film, slipping, scrambling backward, frozen, was not acting. It was a panic attack with cameras running. 20th Century Fox did not give the cast a premiere. Veronica revealed at New York Comic Con in 2024 that she had gone alone to the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood and watched the film as a paying customer. From her seat, she saw audience members get up during the chest burster and walk out. The Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actress went to her that season. No defining lead role has come her way since. 3 marriages defined her life off camera. Director Richard Compton was her longest partner. 25 years until he died of cancer complications in 2007 at 68. The loss ended what had been the most stable relationship of her life. She has 1 son, Dakota Compton. At 77, Cartwright is still working steadily. She appeared on Netflix's Man, on the inside opposite Ted Danson, and played the lead in The Ruse the year before. Recent guest spots include The Good Doctor and The Resident. Her home base remains Los Angeles. Lambert was the navigator whose terror was always closest to the camera. Veronica Cartwright spent 47 years watching the world re-watch her real panic, never quite forgiven for the slot she was put in, never quite leaving the genre that had broken open across her face. Seventh in this cast walked toward the camera covered in milk he could not stand to swallow. Sir Ian Holm Cuthbert played Science Officer Ash. The android nobody noticed was an android until he was already moving wrong. In the scene where Ash malfunctions and tries to suffocate Ripley by stuffing a rolled-up magazine down her throat, Holm gargles a milky fluid that the crew used to indicate android blood. He hated milk in real life. The director was asking him to retain a substance in his mouth he had spent 6 decades avoiding. Holm came into the world in Goodmayes, Essex, on the 12th of September 1931, literally inside a psychiatric hospital where his father, James Cuthbert, worked as superintendent. His mother, Jean, was a nurse. A scholarship to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art followed boarding school. By 1967, he had won the Tony Award for Harold Pinter's The Homecoming on Broadway. He was the most theatrically credentialed actor on the Alien call sheet. The trauma that defined his career was inflicted by his own nervous system. In 1976, mid-performance of Eugene O'Neill's The Iceman Cometh at the Royal Court Theatre, Holmes suffered a complete mental collapse in his dressing room. Returning to the stage proved impossible. He stayed away from live theater for 18 years. Alien in 1979 was part of how he survived that absence. A screen role that paid him roughly £75,000 without requiring him to face an audience. He married 4 times. Tabloids called him Lord of the Flings for the affairs between them. Sophie de Stempel, his 4th wife, survived him, along with 5 children from various relationships. His net worth at death was approximately $25 million, most of it built across 6 decades of patient film work after his stage life broke. Less than a month before he died, Holm filmed a video apologizing for being too unwell to join Elijah Wood, Orlando Bloom, and Sir Ian McKellen on a Lord of the Rings reunion call. He said, "I am sorry to not see you in person. I miss you all and hope your adventures have taken you to many places. I am in lockdown in my Hobbit home, or Holm." Holm died on the morning of the 19th of June, 2020, at age 88, in a London hospital. The illness was Parkinson's-related. His grave sits in a private plot in Highgate Cemetery West, in the section off the western side of the Meadow Loop. Karl Marx, George Michael, and Gene Simmons rest in the same cemetery. Ash was the android nobody could read until it was too late. Ian Holm was a man who had been born inside a psychiatric hospital, broken down on a stage in 1976, hated milk for 80 years, and ended up beneath one of the most visited cemeteries in London. And the last name in the credits belonged to a Nigerian art student who only ever made 1 film. Bolaji Badejo played the alien itself, the creature stalking the corridors of the Nostromo. He stood 7 feet 2 inches tall, with limbs so long that Ridley Scott believed he could make audiences think they were watching something that was not human. The suit, designed by H.R. Geiger, was made of latex and built in roughly 15 separate pieces, with KY jelly smeared over it to make the creature glisten under lights. Inside the suit, the temperature climbed quickly. Badejo could only stay in costume for 15 to 20 minutes at a time before he needed to be cooled down. Lagos, Nigeria, gave him to the world on the 23rd of August, 1953, the second of 6 children. His father, Victor Badejo, would later serve as Director General of the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation. Bolaji studied fine arts in Ethiopia, lived 3 years in San Francisco, then moved to London for graphic design. He was 25, unusually tall, and entirely untrained as an actor when casting agent Peter Archer spotted him having a drink in a Soho pub and asked if he wanted to meet Ridley Scott. His alien salary has never been published. Industry estimates place it between £8,000 and £15,000, meaningful money in 1978 Nigeria, but a fraction of what the principal cast earned. His contract had a first right of refusal clause for sequels, and he exercised his right to refuse. Badejo returned to Nigeria in 1980, opened his own art gallery in Lagos in 1983, and worked as a visual artist for the rest of his life. The franchise income he walked away from would be measured today in the millions. He had been diagnosed with sickle cell anemia as a child. The same disease had already killed his younger brother Deji. There was no effective treatment for it in 1992 Nigeria. Several months after his 39th birthday, Balaji fell seriously ill and was taken to St. Stephen Hospital in Abute Metta, Lagos. He died there on the 22nd of December, 1992, of complications from the same blood disorder that had killed his brother, leaving behind two children, Bibi and Yinka. Badejo was buried in Lagos, in the city where he had been born. The specific cemetery and plot have never been publicly named by his family. Nearly 5 decades after he played cinema's most frightening monster, his exact resting place remains anonymous somewhere in the metropolitan sprawl of his hometown. The alien was the most frightening monster cinema had ever shown. Balaji Badejo was a 25-year-old graphic design student who took the only film role of his life because he was tall and was in the right Soho pub on the right afternoon, and died at 39 of the same blood disease that had killed his younger brother, in the same city where he was born. The Nostromo's crew is buried now across Kentucky, London, Lagos, and a small Jewish cemetery in Washington state, coordinates the spaceship in the film never reached.